Hello dear viewers, a very warm welcome to our channel. In this video we are going to have a look at problems associated with bad crankshaft bearing. The crankshaft is a very crucial component of the engine. It is the one that converts the linear motion of the pistons into a rotary motion needed for moving your vehicle. All that force generated by the explosion inside the cylinder is to be supported by the crankshaft. And the crankshaft bearing, also known as the main bearing, is an engine component that helps support the crankshaft weight and all that force being generated inside the cylinders. Supporting the crankshaft is a very demanding and very crucial task that is done by the crankshaft bearing. The crankshaft bearings are generally made up of a durable material. Wear and tear can happen, and it could happen faster if the recommended car maintenance and service schedule is not followed. For example, if you are not frequently replacing the engine oil, if there is some problem with the lubrication, if the engine is tend to overheat, that can cause catastrophic engine failure, catastrophic crankshaft failure is going to result in. To avoid having this kind of severe problems, it is very crucial that you understand and know symptoms of bad crankshaft bearing. Small problems that started with a faulty crankshaft bearing can result in serious engine or transmission failure. So for this reason, let's have a look at some of the common symptoms of bad crankshaft bearing. 1. Loud knocking or clicking noise from the engine. Knocking noises coming from the engine is one of the most noticeable and common symptom of bad crankshaft bearing. Drivers usually refer to this as a rod knock, which sounds like a consistent hammering that increases as engine speed increases. The rod knock, or that hammering noise, is caused by excessive clearance as a result of bearing wear. Valve train noise can also be sometimes indicative of bad main bearing. This is basically because in most engines, the lubrication system is designed in such a way that oil from the oil pump is first directed to the crankshaft bearing, and then after the crankshaft, it will go to the valve train. Now, when the clearance between the crankshaft and the bearing is excessive, that will cause excessive oil leakage, and the oil that is going to reach the valve train will be reduced. And the valve train will starve of much needed oil pressure, which can result in tapping noise generated by the valve lifters. So this is the reason why valve train noise can be an indication of worn crankshaft bearing. So if you hear any of this noise, have your vehicle inspected immediately. Otherwise, it can cause catastrophic engine damage. 2. Low oil pressure. Loss of oil pressure is also an indicative of damaged engine bearing. Low or reduced oil pressure is an early symptom of bad crankshaft bearing. Normally, the oil pump flows a fixed amount of oil. If there is some internal leakage from the oil that is being pumped by the oil pump, your engine will start to lose oil pressure. You will usually notice it when you first start your car. If there is excessive clearance between the bearing as a result of excessive wear, that will lead to loss of oil pressure, especially at low engine RPM. So, if the oil indicating lamp is sometimes turned on, especially at low engine speed, that could be an indication of low oil pressure. Sometimes worn bearing can also set off the check engine light or the low oil pressure light. 3. Metal, silver, or copper shavings found in the oil. If there is a bearing failure, if the bearings are excessively worn, the appearance of the metal or silver shaving in the oil is going to happen. Many bearings are designed within 3 layers. There is a steel backing plate, there is a layer of copper in the middle, and then there is a soft aluminum outer layer. So as copper is softer but slicker than aluminum, it is used in these bearings to give the owner a last line of protection before the bearing gets down to the steel layer or before it totally breaks. When the bearing wears down to the copper layer, it will warn you by sending out red flag in the form of copper dirt in the oil. So if you detect any copper shaving in the oil or inside the valve cover or in your dipstick, it means that your main bearings are badly broken. If you check your oil using a dipstick and you notice metal shavings, shaving of aluminum dust or shaving of a copper, that can be an indication of bad crankshaft bearing. So it is always a good habit to check the oil filter after every oil change to see if there are any aluminum dust, if there is any copper shaving or any metal kind of stuff available in the oil. Every time when replacing an oil, please do have a look at the texture of the oil. Check to see what is happening inside the oil filter. It is important to have a look at the filter to indirectly figure out the state of the main bearings. 4. Rumbling or thumping sound coming from the engine. This problem is caused by low oil pressures that can potentially damage the bearing surface and the crankshaft itself. The crankshaft bearing noise can be heard as a rumbling or thumping sound that seems to be coming somewhere deep in the engine when you are accelerating. If you notice this sound while driving, then it is important that you stop the engine and not start it at all until it is checked. Doing this can help you keep your vehicle crankshaft from being damaged. If you ignore this warning sign and continue running your engine, then you might end up having to have major engine failure. 5. Transmission noise and worn belt. Worn belt and transmission noise is another sign of worn engine bearing. The main bearing have two types of bearing. The main journal bearings is there. This is where the crankshaft rotates. And there is a thrust bearing which works to keep the crankshaft and the transmission from going back and forth in the thrust direction. So the thrust bearing face can wear like the main surface. Excessive thrust bearing wear will cause the crankshaft to have excessive in-play. If there is enough space on the rod journals, worn out thrust bearing can enable the crank to move backward enough to jump the torque converter or the clutch mechanism, or it can be moving forward and backward enough to result in excessive edge wear on the belts. So if the crankshaft moves excessively, if there is excessive in-play, either the belt is going to wear out or the transmission is going to get into trouble. So transmission noise or worn out belt can be an indication of bad crankshaft thrust bearing. 6. Engine runs roughly or unevenly. Bad crankshaft bearing may also cause rough idle. Bad bearing can cause the engine to rock while it is running, resulting in rough idle, shaking, or vibration. Bad crankshaft bearing can also cause a sluggish or non-responsive engine. Another sign that you may have as a result of bad crankshaft bearing is that your engine may suddenly quit while driving. Damaged bearing could seize up, which would prevent the crankshaft from spinning, and that can cause engine shut-off. 7. Hard starting. Bad crankshaft bearing may also cause hard start. If you have difficulty getting your engine started, it could mean that the bearings are sticking or they are moving slowly due to friction, and this would result in abnormal cranking speed, reduced compression, improper timing between the cylinders, and that will result in difficulty starting. So the added friction from the failing bearing could make the starting your car struggle, and it might take long cranking attempt before the engine is fired up. So difficulty starting is another indication of bad crankshaft bearing. And finally, engine overheating. Bad crankshaft bearing may also cause an overheated engine. If the bearings are worn, this could cause them not to spin as easily as it should, and that will create excessive friction that would heat the bearing and cause them to overheat. So engine overheating can sometimes be associated with bad main bearing. There are different things that can contribute to bad main bearing. For example, if there is insufficient lubrication, if there is lack of lubrication, that will increase the rate of wear, that will increase the friction between the bearings and the crankshaft, and that can eventually lead to main bearing damage. Dirt or debris that are available in the engine can also be cause for main bearing failure. Misassembly, wrong bearing crash, overloading, hot rodding, forcing excessive loads on your vehicle are some of the things that can lead to main bearing failure. Well, dear viewers, that is all we have for you in this video. If you enjoyed what has been presented, please smash the like button. If you are new here, do consider subscribing and turn on notifications so that you will be the first to get notified whenever we come up with another video. Until then, stay safe.